October 7th, 2011. Taiyuan City, Shanxi Province, China. The lingering atmosphere of the extended National Day holiday still filled the small alleys. However, in an old residential area built in the 1980s, a strange incident shattered that peace. The attention of curious residents was drawn to a high-end black car. The residents here were mostly resettled households, people who had lived their entire lives in this area. They knew each other by sight, and they were certain that this luxury car had never appeared here before. The abnormality wasn't just that it was an expensive car in a working-class neighborhood. Its parking position was also extremely peculiar. The car was parked horizontally across a dirt road, its front facing north and its rear south, blocking most of the narrow path. All four doors were locked from the inside. Everything seemed normal until people discovered that the rear trunk was not completely closed. It was ajar by a gap of about 3 centimeters, and from this opening, a strange smell emanated. Receiving a report about the strange vehicle, the forensic technical team of the Jiangkaoping Police Sub-Bureau quickly arrived at the scene. Su Jie, the forensic team leader, was one of the first to approach the evidence and conduct a general observation. He didn't rush to open the trunk. Instead, he circled the car, noting every detail: the parking position, the condition of the tires, the traces around it. After completing the external observations, he carefully inserted a specialized tool into the trunk's gap and gently lifted it. Inside the trunk was not luggage or ordinary items. It was a large cardboard box, the type used for a television, and it was damaged. A large tear on one side revealed a part of the horrifying truth inside. Through that tear, 2 human feet could be seen. They were pale, without shoes or socks. Shifting the view up slightly revealed a part of a lower leg. There was no longer any doubt. This was a murder case. A preliminary examination was conducted right at the scene. When the cardboard box was carefully removed, the victim's entire body was revealed. The victim was a man wearing only underwear, with no shirt, no outer pants, and no shoes. This condition was inconsistent with someone attacked on the street. It suggested that at the time of the incident, the victim was in a private space, possibly his own home or some other discreet location, and he was in a very relaxed state, completely off guard. Secondly, the marks on the body. There was a deep and very clear ligature mark on the victim's neck. Forensic experts call this a ligature furrow from strangulation. Analysis of the mark's morphology indicated it was created by a fibrous, rope-like object with a rough surface and a round cross-section, most likely a rope braided from cotton or hemp. This was the mark of the murder weapon. The preliminary cause of death was determined to be mechanical asphyxia due to external pressure on the airway. Next, there were similar but fainter ligature marks on both of the deceased's wrists. This was a sign of being bound. The victim had been completely subdued before being killed. A critically important point was noted. Apart from the marks from strangulation and binding, there were no other injuries on the victim's body. There were no stab wounds, no cuts, and no signs of a violent struggle or resistance. This was a valuable negative finding. It showed that the perpetrator did not act in a frenzy. The crime was carried out in a controlled manner. It was very likely that the victim had been incapacitated or rendered unconscious before the killer delivered the final blow. Based on post-mortem biological signs, including the degree of rigor mortis and livor mortis, forensic experts provided an initial estimate of the time of death. It was approximately 48 hours prior, which would be around October 5th. After completing the preliminary examination of the victim, the next object of investigation was the car. A silent witness holding countless secrets. First was the disposal site. Why did the killer choose a crowded residential area to abandon the car? This was an extremely risky move. It suggested the killer might have been in a panic, or conversely was extremely confident that no one could trace them. Next, a small detail on the tires became a golden clue. Investigators noticed that the part of the tire in contact with the dirt road was damp and muddy, but the rest of the tire surface and the rim were completely dry. The weather records for Taiyuan City were immediately checked. The results showed that on October 6th, the day before the car was discovered, the city had experienced a rainstorm. The logical deduction from this was clear. The car had been parked at this location before the rain started, and it had not moved since. This significantly narrowed the time frame for the killer's disposal act, from the evening of October 4th to before the rain on October 6th. To get inside, the technical team used a professional method. They opened the trunk and, through the emergency release latch inside, they unlocked all the doors without damaging or disturbing any evidence. Inside the car, there was no sign of a struggle. Everything was suspiciously tidy. There were no personal documents, wallet, or mobile phone that could help identify the victim. The killer had cleaned up very thoroughly. However, on the surface of the steering wheel, experts discovered and collected 3 different sets of fingerprints. One set from a male, one from a female, and a third unidentified set. The case now had its first leads: an unidentified victim, a car with no papers, a contradictory disposal scene, and 3 mysterious sets of fingerprints. While the forensic experts continued their work, another investigation team focused on determining the car's origin. The license plate was registered as AJN 666, a nice, memorable, and rather rare number. However, when investigators entered this number into the National Vehicle Registration System, the result was a mismatch. There was no black sedan registered with this plate. This raised a suspicion. Was it a fake license plate, or was there something more unusual? A seasoned investigator noticed a tiny detail on the surface of the numbers. Under strong light, the surface of the first 2 sixes seemed slightly different from the other characters. It had a slight raised texture and an uneven reflective color. Using a specialized tool, he carefully pried at the edge of the number. As predicted, it was a layer of reflective decal that had been stuck on top. The culprits had been very sophisticated, using the same type of material as the real license plate for camouflage. When the decal was removed, the car's real license plate was revealed: AJN-8116. This act of altering the license plate was not a spontaneous one. It showed careful preparation. The killer not only wanted to hide the victim's identity, but also the identity of the car itself. With the real license plate, things became much easier. The system immediately returned the registration information. The owner of the car was a 38-year-old woman named Feng Mei. Occupation: a teacher at a local elementary school. Feng Mei was summoned to the police station. Initially, upon hearing about the car, she appeared anxious. And when she was shown preliminary photos and related evidence, she couldn't control her emotions. After a moment of collapse, she painfully confirmed the unfortunate man in the trunk was her husband, Wang Qinghua. And when the fingerprint analysis results were compared, a crucial match was confirmed. Of the 3 sets of fingerprints on the steering wheel, one belonged to the victim, Wang Qinghua. The female's fingerprints, not surprisingly, belonged to Feng Mei. The 3rd set of male fingerprints remained a mystery. The presence of her fingerprints was not incriminating evidence, but it placed Feng Mei in the position of an extremely important witness, or even a suspect. She explained that on the afternoon of October 4th, she was the one who drove the car, taking her husband home after an outing. This explained why her fingerprints were on the steering wheel. Faced with her husband's sudden death, Feng Mei, after an initial moment of grief, composed herself with surprising speed. She began to provide the police with detailed information about her husband's final hours. According to her statement, after returning home on the afternoon of October 4th, around 3 p.m., Wang Qinghua said he had an important business meeting. He had to go to Shanxi City, a location quite far from Taiyuan, to discuss a business contract for drainage pipes. She even remembered her husband preparing a cash sum of about 10,000 yuan and wearing a very large gold chain around his neck, weighing over 200 grams. He then drove the car away and never returned. She had tried to contact him many times, but his phone was always turned off. Feng Mei's testimony seemed very reasonable and logical. It painted a clear scenario. Wang Qinghua, carrying a large amount of assets, had become the target of a robbery-murder while on a business trip. But experienced investigators did not rush to conclusions. They noticed serious contradictions in this scenario. The first and biggest contradiction: if this was a robbery, why would the perpetrators leave behind such a valuable asset as the car? A high-end sedan was worth much more than 10,000 yuan and a gold chain. This behavior was completely illogical for professional robbers. They could have easily sold the car for a much larger sum of money. The second contradiction, and also the strangest, the victim's attire. Wang Qinghua was only wearing underwear. His outer clothes were found in the trunk, neatly folded. Why would a robber, after the act, bother to undress the victim? This action offered no benefit and, on the contrary, increased the risk of leaving behind traces. This state of being undressed could only be reasonably explained if the crime did not happen on the road, but in a closed space, an environment where the victim felt absolutely safe and comfortable. He could have been at his own home or the home of someone he trusted deeply. The victim and the perpetrator might have been talking or even spending time together in a very relaxed state, completely off guard. This was completely contrary to the scenario of a surprise attack on a business trip. The third contradiction, the forensic results. Wang Qinghua's time of death was determined to be between 11 p.m. on October 4th and 1 a.m. on October 5th. That was about 8 hours after he left home. If he was going to Changji, a journey of several hours, why did the incident happen so late? And why was the car found in Taiyuan, not on the road to or in Changji? All these contradictions pointed to one possibility. There was something wrong with Feng Mei's statement. Either she was hiding a truth, or she herself did not know her husband's full plan for that fateful evening. To resolve these contradictions, investigators needed to retrace Wang Qinghua's entire journey on October 4th. But this was not easy. Wang Qinghua, 39, was a man with a rather complex background. More than a decade ago, he was just a hired driver, but with his sharpness and boldness, he had built his own transportation company, specializing in contracts to haul coal and earth for construction projects. This line of business, especially at that time, often involved a tangled web of social connections, from officials and mine owners to even underworld elements. Wang Qinghua's social circle was extremely wide and complex, including all sorts of people. When asked about her husband's relationships, Feng Mei was very vague. She said, "Who he did business with, I really knew very little." This statement, once again, raised suspicion. As a wife, did she really know nothing about her husband's work, or was she deliberately hiding something? Unable to rely on the wife's testimony, investigators turned to a more objective and reliable source of information: telecommunication data. They requested the mobile carrier to extract the entire call and message history from Wang Qinghua's phone number in his final days. A long list of calls appeared, hundreds of phone numbers. Each number could be a clue, but it could also be a dead end. The investigators' task was to screen, analyze, and find the most important calls, especially those made on the evening of October 4th. On that list, the last two calls before the phone was turned off, drew their special attention. Both calls were made from the same phone number, one call at 8:40 p.m. and another at 10 p.m. The time of the second call, 10 p.m., was extremely sensitive. It was very close to the victim's estimated time of death, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The person who made this call was very likely one of the last people to speak with Wang Qinghua while he was alive. Tracing this phone number, the police quickly identified the caller. His name was Wang Yang, a close business partner of Wang Qinghua. The name Wang Yang immediately became the focus of the investigation. Records showed that Wang Yang had been partners with Wang Qinghua for about 5 years. They jointly managed the business of transporting earth and stone, a highly profitable but also contentious field. Wang Yang was not just a partner, but also one of Wang Qinghua's closest business associates. The fact that he made the last two calls to the victim's phone before it was turned off placed him as the number one suspect. Investigators immediately sought out Wang Yang for questioning. From the very first moments, Wang Yang's demeanor showed signs of abnormality. He was trembling. When investigators asked questions, he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he would often fall silent for a moment, his eyes darting around, as if trying to arrange his words in his head before speaking. His speech was hesitant and indecisive. While the interrogation was ongoing, another team responsible for reviewing surveillance camera footage made a shocking discovery. They found Wang Qinghua's car in the footage from a speed camera at a major intersection. The time displayed on the photo was 8:53 p.m., October 4th. This time perfectly matched the interval between Wang Yang's two calls. The image from the camera, though not very sharp, was clear enough to identify two people in the car. In the driver's seat was the victim, Wang Qinghua, and sitting in the passenger seat beside him was none other than Wang Yang. Another particularly noteworthy detail: the license plate was covered, not by changing the numbers as when it was discovered, but by a piece of camouflage cloth tied carelessly to cover the entire plate. This action was often used by drivers to avoid speeding tickets. But in the context of a murder case, it carried a completely different meaning. It didn't stop there. Investigators continued to follow the trail. About an hour later, at nearly 10 p.m., the same car appeared on a camera in the opposite direction, heading back toward the city center. But this time, there was only one person in the car. Due to the angle and poor lighting, the image was very blurry, and it was impossible to identify who was driving. These two photos created a horrifying hypothesis. If the driver on the way back was not Wang Qinghua, then it was very possible that at that very moment, Wang Qinghua had been subdued or even already murdered, and the only person with him just before that was Wang Yang. All suspicion seemed to be pointing towards this business partner. When investigators presented the two photos from the surveillance cameras, Wang Yang finally stopped beating around the bush. He admitted that he had lied. That night, he had indeed been with Wang Qinghua. He explained that he had hidden the fact because he was too shocked and scared upon hearing the news of his friend and partner's death. According to Wang Yang's news statement, on the evening of October 4th, he and Wang Qinghua had driven to the outskirts to meet a cement supplier to discuss a project they were collaborating on. After the meeting, Wang Qinghua had driven him all the way home. Wang Yang claimed his wife could testify to this, including the time he arrived home. To verify this, an investigation team immediately went to Wang Yang's home. His wife confirmed her husband's statement. She said Wang Yang came home around 10 p.m. and did not go out again. Neighbors also confirmed seeing Wang Yang at home at that time. This meant that Wang Yang had a very solid alibi. He could not have been at the scene at the time Wang Qinghua was murdered. So why did he cover the license plate? Wang Yang explained that this was a habit of Wang Qinghua. The victim often drove at excessive speeds, and covering the plate was simply a way to avoid being caught by cameras and fined. If Wang Yang's statement was true, then the blurry figure in the car returning at 10 p.m. was Wang Qinghua. After dropping off Wang Yang, where did he go alone? Who did he meet? That person most likely was the real killer. The investigation seemed to have hit a dead end. But just then, Feng Mei, the victim's wife, provided new information, once again pointing the finger at Wang Yang. She revealed that there were serious financial conflicts between her husband and Wang Yang. According to Feng Mei, Wang Yang had borrowed a very large sum of money from her family to invest in a joint project. Initially, it was 440,000 yuan. Later, although he had repaid over 200,000 yuan, in September alone, right before the murder, Wang Yang had borrowed 3 more large sums. The total debt had reached 585,000 yuan. Feng Mei recounted, "I told my husband, with so much money, why not make him sign a promissory note? But my husband just brushed it off, saying they were friends. No need for that." She also said the two had argued many times over this debt. Feng Mei expressed her concern that Wang Yang might have killed her husband to avoid repaying the debt. This was an extremely clear motive for murder. A huge debt could easily turn friendship into hatred. Investigators summoned Wang Yang once again. This time, Wang Yang admitted to borrowing the large sum. However, he insisted that the entire amount was not for personal use, but was invested in the project they were collaborating on. He had all the receipts and documents to prove it. The person he and Wang Qinghua went to meet that evening was the cement supplier for this project, and the money had been used to pay for construction materials. When investigators visited the cement supplier, he confirmed Wang Yang's entire story was true. The partnership and joint investments were real. With a solid alibi and the murder motive dismissed, Wang Yang was temporarily cleared of suspicion. The investigation was back to square one. The case had reached a stalemate. Despite having a lot of information, no clue was strong enough to point in a clear direction. The investigators decided to meet with Wang Yang one more time, this time not as a suspect, but as a witness, the victim's closest friend. They hoped he might remember some detail, no matter how small, about Wang Qinghua's habits or secret relationships. And this time, Wang Yang provided a breakthrough piece of information. He hesitantly said that Wang Qinghua didn't just have one wife, Feng Mei. The victim also had an extramarital affair, a mistress he was supporting financially. Wang Yang guessed that after dropping him off, Wang Qinghua had likely gone to that woman's home. Following Wang Yang's directions, the police found the mistress's apartment, a young woman named Hui Hui. When asked about the night of October 4th, Hui Hui seemed quite calm. She confirmed that Wang Qinghua had come to see her that night. However, he only stayed for about 15 minutes. He said he had to go meet another friend and left in a hurry. To clarify this statement, the forensic technical team was dispatched to conduct a full examination of Hui Hui's apartment, and they didn't have to search for long. Right on the light-colored wooden floor, leading from the living room to the bedroom entrance, technicians discovered numerous tiny specks of a dark red color, suspected to be bloodstains. Under the light of a specialized lamp, they appeared very clearly. These blood drops were scattered randomly, as if an injured person had moved through the room. If these bloodstains belonged to Wang Qinghua, everything would become clear. Hui Hui's apartment was the primary crime scene. Samples were collected and sent for urgent DNA analysis. However, the result was a major disappointment. The bloodstains found in Hui Hui's home were not human blood. It was chicken blood. Hui Hui explained that a few days earlier, she had butchered a chicken at home and hadn't cleaned up properly. Analyzing the motive, investigators also found that Hui Hui had no reason to harm Wang Qinghua. Their relationship was purely transactional. Her purpose was only money. As long as Wang Qinghua provided for her, she wouldn't do anything foolish. Hui Hui was temporarily cleared of suspicion. While the field investigation teams were tracking Wang Qinghua's complex relationships, back in the forensic lab, experts were still working diligently. They didn't just stop at determining the cause of death. A comprehensive toxicology analysis was performed on the victim's biological samples, and the result they found shocked the entire special investigation team. In Wang Qinghua's blood and gastric fluids, experts detected the presence of benzodiazepines. This is a group of active substances commonly found in sedatives and sleeping pills. The concentration of this substance was high enough to cause a state of deep sedation, reducing reflexes, impairing cognition, and ultimately leading to sleep. This discovery answered one of the biggest questions of the case. Why could a strong man like Wang Qinghua be subdued and murdered without any signs of a struggle? The answer was now clear. He had been drugged. The victim had been put into a helpless state before the killer struck. This further reinforced the theory that the crime occurred in an environment where the victim completely trusted the person he was with. Immediately, investigators expanded their focus to illicit substance use. They reviewed all of Wang Qinghua's relationships, looking for anyone with a history of drug use or trafficking. However, all these individuals had alibis. They all claimed not to have met Wang Qinghua on the night of the murder. Wang Yang also confirmed that during their time together, Wang Qinghua was completely sober and showed no signs of using any stimulants. This meant that Wang Qinghua was drugged after he parted ways with Wang Yang at 10 p.m. The discovery of sedatives and illicit drugs made investigators re-examine the entire case from a different perspective. They realized that there was one person who knew very well about Wang Qinghua's double life, but had always pretended to be naive and ignorant. That person was Feng Mei. Feng Mei and Wang Qinghua's marriage began in difficult times. They were high school classmates and built their careers from scratch. Initially, they were just vegetable sellers at the market. Wang Qinghua worked incredibly hard, selling vegetables by day and driving a taxi by night, sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a day. Life was hard but happy. However, when his transportation company prospered, when money became plentiful, Wang Qinghua changed completely. He began to indulge in debauchery, drinking all night, and during these escapades, he started using drugs. Not only that, he openly supported a mistress. According to close friends, Feng Mei was not unaware of these things. She knew very well that her husband had a mistress. The two had had many fiery arguments over it. She also knew he was involved with drugs. So why, from the very beginning, when working with the police, did she insist she knew nothing? A new theory was proposed. Could it be that Feng Mei, out of deep resentment for her unfaithful husband, had planned revenge? She had a clear motive. She knew his schedule and habits. She could have hired someone, taking advantage of Wang Qinghua's trust, to drug him, then kill him and stage a robbery. However, when investigators verified Feng Mei's schedule on the night of the murder, this theory was shaken. Witnesses confirmed that on the evening of October 4th, Feng Mei had taken her child to her mother's house and stayed there overnight. She had a clear alibi. She could not have been the one who directly committed the crime. Despite this, suspicion towards Feng Mei was not completely dismissed. She might not have been directly involved, but could she have been the mastermind behind it all? 9 days had passed since the case began. Pressure from superiors and the public was mounting. The special investigation team seemed to be lost in a maze with no exit. Every potential suspect had an alibi. Every theory proposed had inconsistencies. Just as the deadlock reached its peak, important news came from the field investigation team, who were still persistently working with witnesses. They had returned to see Hui Hui, Wang Qinghua's mistress, one more time. This time, she provided a new name, a piece of information she had previously deliberately concealed. Hui Hui said, "Wang Qinghua definitely didn't just have me. I have a feeling that before he was with me, he was supporting another woman. I heard his friends say her name is Wu Qiaojiao." Wu Qiaojiao, a completely new name. Investigators immediately checked the records. Wu Qiaojiao, 40 years old, originally from Chongqing, came to Taiwan to make a living. She sold clothes. Her husband had passed away from an illness a few years ago, leaving her to raise a young child alone. After her husband's death, the economic burden on Wu Qiaojiao grew heavier. In that situation, through a friend's introduction, she met Wang Qinghua and quickly became his mistress. However, this relationship did not last long. Wu Qiaojiao could not accept Wang Qinghua's drug habit. Worse, he even forced her to use drugs with him. When Wu Qiaojiao suggested breaking up, Wang Qinghua became furious and threatened. "If you dare leave me, I will kill you and your child." For the safety of her child, Wu Qiaojiao decided to cut off all contact, move to a new place, and start a relationship with a new boyfriend. However, according to Wang Qinghua's friends, he did not let go. He constantly harassed her, showing up at Wu Qiaojiao's house in the middle of the night, banging on the door and causing disturbances. A complete picture of the motive emerged. The persistent harassment, the death threats against her child, all had created a deep-seated hatred. It was very possible that Wu Qiaojiao and her new boyfriend, unable to bear it any longer, had planned together to eliminate Wang Qinghua once and for all. The problem was, no one knew where Wu Qiaojiao was currently living. She had moved to hide from Wang Qinghua. How could they find her in a large city? While teams were fanning out to search for information about Wu Qiaojiao, investigators once again approached Wang Yang. They asked him in the most minute detail about the final call at 10 p.m. And this time, Wang Yang recalled a detail he had previously thought unimportant. He recounted, "At that time, I called Brother Hua. I heard the sound of his car's engine just turning off. It seemed like he had just parked. And right as we were about to hang up, I heard a sound on his end of the line. It sounded like an ambulance siren. An ambulance siren. The call took place at 10 p.m. This was extremely close to the time Wang Qinghua was murdered. If Wang Yang wasn't mistaken, the place where Wang Qinghua parked his car at that moment was very likely the primary crime scene." Without a moment's hesitation, the special investigation team immediately contacted the city's emergency medical center. They requested a full history of all calls and the movement logs of all ambulances between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. on October 4th. The results came back quickly. During that period, only one ambulance had been dispatched. It went to provide emergency care for a patient in an area called Shaojingyu, near Dahuashu, west of the Yingzhe Bridge. If the sound Wang Yang heard was real, then the killer, Wu Qiaojiao, was almost certainly living in this area. A massive, unprecedented search was launched. Hundreds of police officers were mobilized, turning over every corner, knocking on every door in the cordoned-off area. And finally, after hours of searching, they found Wu Qiaojiao. When faced with the police, Wu Xiaojiao did not seem overly panicked. It appeared she had prepared for this situation. She admitted that on the night of October 4th, Hinghua had indeed come to find her. She retold the story of the harassment, of him banging on the door and shouting outside. However, she adamantly insisted that she had not opened the door. She said she ignored Wang Qinghua's commotion outside, and after a while, when she saw he had left, she was so scared that she immediately drove her own car away from home to stay temporarily at a friend's house in case Wang Qinghua returned. To prove her words, she even provided a witness. A neighbor confirmed seeing Wu Xiaojiao leave in her red car around 11 p.m. This alibi seemed very plausible. It had a witness and a specific time. But seasoned investigators knew that a lie, no matter how perfect, will have cracks. They believed the real crime scene was this house. And if there was a crime scene, there would certainly be evidence. While Wu Xiaojiao was still being questioned, an emergency search warrant was executed at her apartment. The forensic technical team was once again deployed, and very quickly a discovery caught everyone's attention. In the corner of the living room was a flat-screen television. Its brand was Hisense, a 29-inch model. Hisense, 29-inch. This name and number immediately reminded investigators of a key piece of evidence from the initial scene. The cardboard box used to contain the victim's body was also the box for a Hisense 29-inch TV. Could this be a coincidence? Possibly, but in a murder investigation, there is no room for random coincidences. This similarity strongly reinforced the suspicion that Wu Qiao's apartment was the primary crime scene. The search continued more meticulously. The technicians missed nothing, and then the decisive evidence emerged. On the bedsheet, they discovered a very small stain, almost invisible to the naked eye. It was dark brown and had dried. It didn't look like a normal stain. Based on their experience, the experts suspected it was a blood stain. A sample was immediately taken and sent for urgent DNA analysis. At the same time, other investigators found another piece of evidence hidden in the wardrobe. It was a length of cotton rope with a rough surface, perfectly matching the morphology of the ligature mark on the victim's neck. A few hours later, the results came back. There was no room for doubt. The blood stain on Wu Xiaojiao's bedsheet had a DNA profile that was a perfect match to the victim, Wang Qinghua. Faced with the blood stain, the rope, and the TV box, Wu Xiaojiao knew she could no longer deny it. The psychological wall she had tried to build collapsed completely. She bowed her head, confessed, and recounted the entire truth of the fateful night of October 4th. That night, Wang Qinghua had come to her house. He didn't just harass her from outside. He managed to get inside. After using drugs, he became uncontrollable, continuing to force Wu Xiaojiao to become his mistress again and to break up with her current boyfriend. When Wu Xiaojiao refused once more, Wang Qinghua flew into a rage. In his drug-induced state, his consciousness began to slip. He started threatening and insulting her, and then he uttered the words that pushed the tragedy to its peak. "If you don't come back to me, I will kill your son. I will kill your whole family." The threat aimed at her son, Wu Xiaojiao's only weakness and most precious thing, was the last straw. The fear and hatred that had been accumulating for so long exploded. Taking advantage of Wang Qinghua being in a state of euphoria and not paying attention, she secretly put the sleeping pills she had prepared into his drink and gave it to him. After drinking it, Wang Qinghua gradually lost consciousness and fell into a stupor. That was when Wu Xiaojiao decided to act. She used the very rope she found in her house to end the life of the man who had brought so much pain and fear to her and her son. After committing the crime, she took all the victim's cash and his gold chain. She dragged the body into the bedroom and used the old TV box to contain it. But the next problem arose. She was too small and the victim was too heavy. She couldn't possibly move the box out of the house by herself. At her most desperate moment, her phone rang. It was an online friend named Gao Yuan. In her desperation, Wu Xiaojiao blurted out a request for Gao Yuan to come and help her with something. When Gao Yuan arrived, he helped Wu Xiaojiao carry the heavy box downstairs, with the initial intention of putting it in her car. But during the move, because the box was so heavy and cumbersome, it was bumped and torn open. Gao Yuan saw what was inside. Faced with the horrifying truth, instead of running away, Gao Yuan said something Wu Chaojiao would never forget. "It's okay, I'll carry the burden for you. We'll solve this together." The two criminals decided to cooperate. They realized Xiao Zhao's car was too small and old, unsuitable for a long drive. They decided to use the victim's own Honda. Together, they moved the box containing the body from Xiao Zhao's car to the trunk of the victim's Honda. That was when they were seen by the witness at the gas station. They had refueled and changed the license plate with the initial plan to drive to a remote mountainous area to dispose of the body. But on the way, fear and panic made them change their plan. They decided to find a place somewhere in the city, a hidden corner, to abandon the car, hoping no one would discover it. And the place they chose was the old residential area, where this tragic story began to unfold. After the whole truth was revealed, the law delivered its final verdict. Wu Chaojiao, for the act of intentionally taking another's life and appropriating property, faced the most severe sentence. Although her circumstances had sympathetic elements, the crime was particularly serious, involving preparation and calculation. The fact that she was pushed to the brink could be a mitigating factor, but it could not erase the nature of a murder. Gao Yuan, the reluctant accomplice, also had to pay the price for his actions. Although he did not directly kill, the fact that he knew there was a body in the box and still deliberately helped to hide, transport, and dispose of it constituted the crimes of concealing a crime and being an accomplice to the desecration of a corpse. Misplaced kindness and blind chivalry had led an ordinary citizen into the clutches of the law.